See. All right, so welcome everyone to our first workshop as part of our Proud to Work career series. Today's workshop is navigating the virtual job hunt. Before we get started, I want to let everyone know that we are recording today's session so that we can share the resource out to others who may not be able to join us today. Please feel free to keep your camera off or change your name. Do what you need to do to feel comfortable in our space. We do have an exciting hour planned for you today. I'd like to ask Sam to start us out by giving our land acknowledgement.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. And we're going to begin today by honoring the Dakota and Anishinaabe people whose lands we occupy. This land is unceded, meaning it was taken by force. And I invite each of us who are settlers or visitors to this land to become familiar with the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples and their vibrant lives and work. One way we can honor Indigenous peoples is to be aware of the issues they face, such as the epidemic that is missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirits. And by standing with Indigenous communities and working to fight settler colonialism in our everyday lives. Reuniting and restoring Indigenous peoples to the land should be our collective goal. This is the definition of land back and the reason we do land acknowledgements. So we currently reside on the stolen lands of Indigenous peoples, and we honor the physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual spaces we occupy. We are in the midst of a global pandemic and continued racialized violence, and recognize the immense power and privilege we hold in sharing our work with you all today. Our histories are complicated, tangled, and filled with resilience of our ancestors from before and yet to come. And we want to imagine spaces and places where we are liberated, transformed, and in solidarity together in struggle, imagination, and futures. And we wish you and our communities health, safety, slivers of joy, and care in the midst of a time of grief, death, pain, and trauma. And that is from our Native Student Services Coordinator, Dr. Kelly Collins, and our Student Life Director, Heather Liu. So there we go.
Thank you, Sam. And Sam, can I have you take a second and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Sam Poindexter. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Women's and LGBTQ Student Services Coordinator at Metro State.
Thank you, Sam. Sam's going to be moderating our chat today. So while we work through today's presentation, please feel free to add questions you have to our employers who are here with us into the chat feature. We will have time for a Q&A at the end of our discussion. So let's get started. I'm Emily Johnson. I'm a career counselor at the Career Center here at Metropolitan State University. I use she, her pronouns. And this workshop in our series is being co-sponsored by our department, the Career Center and the Women and LGBTQ Resource Center, which is run by Sam. And we could not run this event without our favorite partner, which is Mosier. And so we have Nick Allm on the line. Nick, can you take a moment to introduce yourself and give us just a little bit of information about Mosier?
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Allm. I use they, them pronouns. As Emily mentioned, I'm the executive director of Mosier. We love Metro State at Mosier because y'all are always just doing the coolest stuff. This is our, I don't know, like our 6th event, probably over a 4-year period that we've done with all of you. Mosier is interested first and foremost in making Minnesota the #1 destination for LGBTQ people and their families. We got started 5 years ago with a mission of enabling employment equity for everyone LGBTQ. And we really use Pride Month as a way to spark conversations around employment equity, economic justice, on the challenges. We try to highlight the challenges that queer job seekers face. And so when Emily came forward with this idea, it was a no-brainer. So just thrilled to be here and thrilled that we have these great organizations involved.
Thank you, Nick.
Yep.
As I've mentioned a couple times, this is the first of our series. And so before we wrap up today, we're also going to have a moment to talk about our next 2 workshops, and we'll have Nick share about the upcoming Queer Career Fair. So thank you, Nick, for joining us today. And then a big thank you to our panelists. So we have Jim Houston from Xcel Energy, Robert Reed from Allianz, and Carolyn from the Minnesota Pollution Agency. Can I have you each introduce yourself and share your job title? And then we'll get started in some questions.
Yeah, I'll go first. My name is Jim Houston. I'm a inclusion and diversity consultant with Xcel Energy. My responsibility is basically forming community partnerships, building relationships with organizations that we don't necessarily have relationships with now, and getting those getting those folks connected with our business unit leaders so that we can build those relationships on that side.
Thank you, Jim. Robert, why don't you go next?
Yes, I'm Robert Reed, and I'm the lead recruiter at Allianz Life. We're an insurance company here. Our company's located on Highway 394. I also run diversity recruiting programs here at Allianz, and actually Mosier has helped us set up a couple of those. So we're partnering with Mosier on some of our diversity efforts over the last year or so.
Wonderful, thank you. And Carolyn, next.
Thank you. Yes, so I work for the state of Minnesota at Pollution Control Agency. And one of the agency's biggest goals is to increase the diversity and really just reflect the population of the state and our candidate employee pool. So a lot of my diversity, equity, and inclusion focus revolves around recruitment and retention.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here. And I'm so excited to talk about what navigating the virtual job search is truly like. As things are opening up and changing, I'm envisioning a world where some of the elements that we've had from the past year, 15, 16 months, are going to stay the same. And so I'm really excited to gain some information from all of you today. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to pose to you before we open it up to the chat. So my first question is, how can a candidate navigate networking in an online environment? And so we know networking is one of the fastest ways to finding employment. Can you speak to how we can do this without that time to sit in a coffee shop together or in our virtual environment we have here? Robert, you're not on mute,
Yeah.
so you get to go first.
Okay. Sorry if I was supposed to be on mute. So I think the first item on that list from a recruiting standpoint would be to use LinkedIn and to utilize the power of that networking tool. So be sure to use the functions that are available in that platform. And so there are things like posting your resume and marking yourself as available for opportunities and reaching out to people to connect with them. All of those things are available for free. Of course, you can spend a little bit of money and get some advanced features, but certainly that would be up to you. But you know, those things are probably the most easy and most accessible things for folks right now is to utilize LinkedIn. So that'd be my number one recommendation. And I think also just coupling that with utilizing your friends and family as well, because your friends and family are your closest people, your best allies, your closest connections, and they're the folks that have skin in the game, you know, for you. So I think utilizing those connections and just asking your friends and family, hey, is your company hiring? Do you know anyone that's hiring? Who do you know in the industry that you could connect me with that would, you know, provide, you know, any kinds of tips about what's happening in their company, and maybe you could have a virtual meeting with someone, make any kind of connections that way. So those are my suggestions, and maybe some of the others will have some more comments.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. I use LinkedIn a lot, and I think in addition to just making sure you're on there, but you know, it's just like any other social media. You know, like part of it is content that you're sharing. And you know, like I focus on sharing a lot of things that are directly related to the work that I do, things that I'm interested in, but you know, making sure that you have a presence on a place like that certainly won't help. And I would say also, you know, there's lots of like Zoom type events and Zoom career fairs that are happening. And, you know, when you're in that environment, I guess I'll say, you know, because I participate in career fairs, in that environment, I think it helps to go in with a position in mind, you know, like, or an application already submitted, so that you're not just doing the introduction and saying, you know, to some recruiter, you know, like, tell me what positions you have available. At a company like Xcel Energy, we have like 150 jobs. And so if we can take this time in a career fair where you maybe have like 10 minutes, you know, 5 or 10 minutes to talk to somebody, if you have already applied for the position, then you know, we can take the next step, if that makes sense. You know, then we can start talking about you as an individual. And in my case, you know, like if I have a good conversation with somebody that's applied, I can go to that hiring leader and say, hey, I just talked to such and such a person that's already in this pool. You know, take a look at their resume. But if I have a good conversation with somebody and there's no connection to the company, then it's just a conversation. I like those as well, but it may not necessarily help you as a candidate, if that makes sense, you know? So I'd say, you know, like in an environment like this, you know, just use your time effectively, you know, do that prep work on the front end, you know, get as far ahead into, you know, whatever you can before you have these conversations. And then when you do finally get to have them, then you're just using that time effectively. And I would say now, like for someone like me, I don't like having coffee with people. I don't drink coffee. And so like a Zoom meeting, an email, stuff like this is very easy for me. It's much more comfortable. And so like take advantage of that. I mean, in the past year, I've probably met with more people via Zoom in the past year than I had in, you know, 2 years of in-person meetings when I was at the office. So, you know, it's just good to take advantage of and just be ready, be prepared, and like, you know, take that chance.
Thank you. Carolyn, do you have info you can add to that?
Yeah, I think, you know, just to add off of LinkedIn is a really great networking tool. And I've been making more of a concerted effort, even though natural resources careers tends to be a little bit of a smaller industry, just to go to a lot of Zoom networking events like this, career fairs. I know career fairs have lost a little bit of their popularity. They can be a little awkward for both sides. But I think that the online features made it a little bit easier, a little bit less time consuming for everyone. And then I'd say for those students who maybe don't like have a lot of connections in the industry they want to be in, for example, at the state, all postings have the recruiter's name, and you can reach out and ask them to reply. When do they think they're going to make a decision? You know, when the posting's going to close, things like that. And then don't forget about your professors. And I'm guessing Emily might know a few people too. So if you don't think, you know, your inner circle is going to have those connections for you, then use Metro State too. Your professors and the Career Services Center are always happy to help.
Great advice. I just had a student share with me that they never thought of seeking that advice from their faculty. So thank you for that. Robert, I'm just going to put you on the spot one more time regarding this question about networking. I hear from a lot of students who feel uncomfortable, for lack of a better word, reaching out to someone through LinkedIn if they don't know that person or don't have a connection. So can you give some advice on that kind of cold call or cold outreach? How can that be successful?
Yeah, certainly. A lot of recruiters have open LinkedIn connections, so they're willing to accept invites for folks. So that's one way to reach out to recruiters, is just to send a cold message, but say, I was looking to connect with you because I'm looking for a job in X, whatever you're looking for a job in, and would love to connect and hear any of your ideas about the current job market or something like that. And so just looking to open up any kind of dialogue around, you know, the job search and that type of thing, looking for advice certainly helps break the ice a little bit, and instead of, hey, do you got a job for me, that type of thing, and starting to make that connection, because even though they may not have a job for you today, there could be something in the future. And so asking for help is better than other methods. So that's one suggestion that I have. If you can come up with the email of the recruiter, that's another great way to make a connection, just to say, here are my skills. If you have something, let me know, if you have any suggestions for me, that type of thing.
Thank you for that. And Jim, I saw you raise your hand. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, and I mean, just to piggyback off it, I mean, that's pretty much how I got my own job here at Xcel Energy. And at some point, we started this program last year, but I got a random message from someone on LinkedIn, this young guy from Purdue University, who was just asking for more information. Like, he's talking about his career and he wants to go into energy, and wasn't necessarily asking for a job. He had applied for a couple with us, but through this conversation that I had with him, I learned that, like, he was a smart person, and he was, really interested in this work. And he's been working for us for about 6 months now. I mean, that was the end result, is that, like, when an opportunity came up, I reached out to, whoever the hiring leader was, and I was like, this is someone that you have to have a conversation with, because he's really smart and he's just a great fit for this opportunity that we put together. And he's here. And I mean, again, it's the same way I got my job. I just stopped somebody when I heard there was an opening. I was like, hey, let's chat. And, like, I'm not saying that it has to, it doesn't have to be like, I'm interested in X, like, I want this job. Can you get me to the hiring leader? It's like, learn more about me, like, let's have a real conversation, because that's going to be what makes the difference for some folks. It's like, is this a smart person? Is this someone like I enjoyed talking to? Those kind of things are just as important as whether you have X number of degrees and stuff like that. My degree is in criminal justice, 2016 Metro State. It has nothing to do with my work right now. So it's about those relationships for sure.
Well, thank you both for that unexpected question. I definitely heard the permission you guys have said. People can do that cold outreach. People are going to say no here and there, but maybe they're going to meet folks like you guys who are willing to have those conversations. So thanks for giving that permission and that really practical advice about how to approach those. All right, so my next question for you is, I would love for you all to share, and Jim, I'm going to ask you to start this one. Share with us, what does a virtual job fair look like, and how do I navigate a virtual job fair? So I think for some, it's a nerve-wracking experience. And so if you can kind of pull away the curtain and explain what that might be like for a job seeker, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, and I'll say it can be nerve-wracking for us a little bit as well. So my typical experience has been chat rooms. It's basically chat rooms where maybe there's 2 or 3 recruiters or 2 or 3 representatives from the company who are just waiting for people to come in, and ask questions. And really, that's what we're there for. We're there to ask questions and get information. And, that's essentially it. It's not this kind of like high pressure situation. I think that, it can feel like that because you're not in front of anybody, and we're not shaking hands right now and things like that. And so really, I think it's as a job seeker, I think it's your time to, like, look for whatever the next step is. This is why I say, like, for these career fairs, it really does help if you have a position that you've already applied for, that you can just bring up to whoever you're talking to. Because in my situation, I can look that information up. I can see your applicant, I can see your application. I can see where you are in the process, and it can help, spur the kind of questions that I might want to pass on to a hiring leader. And so I would say, if you're going to join any career fair and there's companies in mind that you're thinking about, go in there, apply for a job. Even if you don't really intend to get it or anything like that, get your name in that system, because that makes it much easier for the recruiters to take that next step and bring it to someone who's a decision maker. And, you know, it's a, you know, they're casual, friendly environments to me, you know, like, you know, learn something about the company, ask questions about the company, you know, like maybe ask something that's not even related to your work, you know, like as an example, Xcel Energy, we have this 2050, you know, carbon free goal that's coming up. You know, like, what's it like to work in a nuclear plant? You know, have you ever seen the inside of a nuclear power plant? What's it look like inside of a power plant in general? I mean, those are the kind of things that I love talking about, because I don't know anything about IT. You know, I don't know anything about IT or like what these smart people do, but I've seen inside of a power plant, and that stuff is pretty cool. And like, I understand, you know, like as an example, like the water that we take in to cool down the plant, we have to put it back in the river in the same condition that it entered the plant, and that's difficult to do. And so like some of that stuff I'm familiar with, and so just, you know, treat it as an opportunity to learn and move yourself forward. That's what I would say. But yeah, it's a lot of like chatting and typing and stuff like that right now. I'll be happy to get back to in-persons.
Carolyn, Robert, would you share too about your experiences in virtual job fairs?
Yeah, I think it was Jim that was talking, right? I think Jim asking questions about the company, like what's the inside of a power plant like? That's a really good question. I mean, you know, the state, we have a lot of public information easily available. There's a lot of questions that you can ask. For example, like, have you approved an Xcel for a permit for Xcel Energy lately? I wouldn't know that personally, but just you know, different questions like that show like, hey, I read the website. Or even just, you know, some people will even say to me, you know, your mission, which is to protect the environment and human health, really spoke to me. How does your job contribute to the overall mission of the PCA, right? Just kind of that proof that you've been out on the website and that you're excited and curious. I think that's really helpful. And we can't tell if you've looked it up that morning or like 2 days before, or like a week before too. So that's like a huge advantage. And really just applying for jobs that you think you're even close, you closely meet the minimum qualifications. One thing I've heard lately is that people feel like if they don't meet the preferred qualifications, they won't apply. That's their preferred qualifications for a reason. List as many as you have and put your application in, right? If you meet the minimum qualifications at the state, the supervisor has to consider your application. So it's really a disadvantage to not. But yeah, I would say if you can kind of casually drop like, yeah, I've actually been to your website in the conversation, that will make a big difference too. And you can have just been there.
Robert, let's hear from your experience.
Yeah, well, a couple suggestions I have on a different vein from what Jim and Carolyn have been talking about. So you need to be patient in a job fair. For virtually, you know, meeting virtually is very different than meeting in person. So a little bit of patience is going to go a long way. There could be a lot of people chatting, you know, with the recruiters or other people, you know, at the event. So, you know, you might not hear back immediately. So don't expect the same kind of, you know, response as in person. You have to be a little patient. They may be typing a message to somebody else or, you know, chatting with 2 or 3 people. So, you know, don't expect to get an interview immediately at the virtual job fair. You know, be patient and just make a connection. Really, that's my suggestion is you're just there to break that ice, make that connection, get your resume in, you know, make that connection with them, and then try to, you know, further that connection at a later time, because there's going to be a bunch of people at the job fair and you don't know how many, you know, so you don't know how much time you have with the person. Some of these platforms allow for scheduling individualized interviews, so that's really nice. But usually a recruiter can give you maybe 5 or 10 minutes and that's about it. So don't expect too much in these virtual job fairs. And the technology is not always so easy to use. It's sometimes a little confusing, and sometimes that the platform gets bogged down and the chat feature slows down to a crawl. So patience is very important. And you won't know how many people go to a job fair and they don't post their resume in the job fair platform. It happens a lot. So don't be one of those. Be sure to post your resume in your profile on the virtual job fair. So that's an important key point.
Robert, are you less likely to engage with a job seeker who hasn't posted their resume?
I don't think so,
Okay.
but it certainly puts someone ahead, because as a recruiter, we will, we'll see that someone is chatting, and a lot of these platforms just let us click right on your name, and then your profile comes up. So, job seekers need to realize that, if you have only a little bit of information, we're going to say, oh, how dedicated are you, for this job fair? Did you just find out about it 5 minutes ago and sign up, and, that was it. So, it shows that you're prepared. So
I was just going to say, I hear a theme among all three of your answers of preparation really is key. Great notes. Thank you. No, so we started with networking. We talked about the kind of the job fair process. A candidate is going to have an interview with you now. And so I'd like to hear from you. How can a candidate stand out in a video interview? And I'm really inclined, I love to hear the do not do this stories. So if you have some positive examples, negative examples, I'd love to hear both. And Carolyn, why don't we start with you this time?
Okay. So our agency always makes sure there's a backup plan, right? So we'll tell a candidate, this is the phone number we have on file with you. If everything drops out, give us a few minutes, because we're going to join everyone into one call. Just be patient. We promise we're going to call you back. So if the employer doesn't do that, you can say, hey, here's my phone number just in case we get disconnected. That does, sometimes your camera's going to fail. Sometimes the whole video call fails too. So I would say, don't panic. Make sure that you're aware there is a delay sometimes with talking. And so if you think they're done asking a question or saying something, look up and just see if their lips are still moving. If there's any sort of delay, then you can kind of tell if they're maybe still talking, and you can, ask them to repeat it or clarify if you didn't get it. And then it's still really, really important to prepare those interview questions ahead of time. I can tell you that after graduate school, I blew a really important interview because I thought I was super hot at doing interviews, because I gave them all the time. And wouldn't I know how to give an interview and pull an answer right out of thin air? I did not. It was embarrassing. It was terrible. I'm sure they blacklisted me. That's actually not true. Employers don't do that. But prepare. Because we can still see the panic look on your face when you're like, oh yeah, I'm not ready for this. That still comes through. And again, ask career services for help. I'm sure Emily just loves working on behavior-based interview question responses, don't you?
Yes, we are here. And what's been really fun to practice virtual interviews or video interviews, we'll record them so the job seeker can watch it back and see, are they spinning in their chair the whole time, or do we only see this much of their face on camera? So thanks, Carolyn. Robert, what would you add?
Yeah, I'd say that be sure to test your connection beforehand to make sure that it's working. And I'd say that you'd want to have a kind of a fake interview with a friend, so to speak, to get any pointers about, is your background, too busy? Is there, should you be interviewing at a different place? Is the lighting okay? Are you speaking well? Do they hear you well? All of those types of, logistical things should be checked out before you interview. And treat the virtual interview as just as if it were an in-person interview. So dress for success, and make sure you have good eye contact. Remember that the screen is not the eye contact. The camera, wherever the camera is located, that's the eye contact. So keep that in mind. And anyway, those are some of my suggestions. So.
Well, thanks, Robert. And Jim, what would you add?
Yeah, not much. I mean, I think they said a lot of things that I would say. Yeah, you can stand out in virtual and video interviews, just like you can in person. But, just making sure you can nail those behavioral questions, practice those scenarios, find a scenario, and use it as often as you can, just make sure you get that down. I just went through this process myself, and I did well in the interview, but I mean, having that information at the ready makes a difference. I got frozen a couple of times, even though I've been through interviews a lot. And so, yes, being prepared, making sure you can answer those questions will do it. And I think the other thing that I noticed is, like, now that we're in this environment, not only are, like, I feel that the video environment has made things be more casual, and, people are at their homes, and, like, I'm in my kitchen right now. And I think that, like, obviously you want to put your best foot forward. But, like, in these situations, like, you're not going to fool anybody, like, if you don't know what you don't know, it's going to come through. You can certainly impress people, you can certainly, like, not do well in an interview, but you're not going to trick anybody either way, so just make sure that you get ready and you're authentic in this process. And I think that's the best you can do, like, if you're authentic and you answer those questions to the best of your ability and they don't choose you, that's their loss, not yours.
I'm disappointed I didn't hear any horror stories of terrible interviews gone wrong.
Well, if you want to hear one.
I'll hear one.
I just think that everyone's gonna hit a tough interview, and wouldn't it be so unkind of us?
I know.
At their worst moments, even though we would keep the details confidential. I'm sure they're parading me around at that company I spoke of. I'm happy to tell you about my own horror stories of how badly I did, but
I think when we started, what was that,
like,
Jim?
where the camera freezes. I've been in a couple of those, and I mean, as a group, it was cool because as a group, we didn't say anything, like this poor person's face was like, ooh, and frozen like that for the whole interview. But we just, we just didn't say anything. They kept going. They had no idea that they froze. I'm not even sure if they knew that we froze. But, like that kind of thing is going to happen, and, like, I think in the most recent interview I went through, like, I dropped the call in the middle of a conversation with their chief human resources officer, like, they called me back and stuff, but, technology can be problematic.
Yeah. When we started the pandemic, there was that lady who a supervisor couldn't take the potato filter off her Teams. So she ran an entire meeting as a potato. And I imagine someone's done that in an interview somewhere.
That would be cool.
I liked the lawyer who couldn't get the cat filter off in front of the judge. I mean, we just had to, yes, someone did it with the cat. I mean, you got to be so stressed out. You're a lawyer, you're in court technically. You're probably like, this is not what they taught me in law school, man.
No. I can assure you I'm here and I'm not a cat.
Your Honor.
Well, thank you for that really practical advice. I think that the summary of treat it real, dress to impress, still prepare, those are all really great bits of information for people to bring to the virtual environment as well. And so on that note, I want to merge into our last question. So if people have questions, now's a great time to start adding them into the chat. Sam would like to suggest that people wear pants or bottoms to their interview. That's always good advice. But my last question for our group before we open it up to our attendees is I'd like to hear from the recruiter's perspective. Will virtual interviews and virtual job fairs go away as we return back to maybe a little bit more of pre-pandemic life? Are these features going to go away? I'm going to ask Carolyn to go first because Carolyn's going to have to pop out soon, and we'll get extra time with Jim and Robert.
Yeah. Daycare issues, see, happens to everybody. So I would say I don't think they're going away. And I think some will come back into the office. Some will continue to be virtual. I know for, and I saw a lot of great Metro State applicants in the pool this year, so I'm really excited. But we do a lot of seasonal hiring for those folks that are interested in biology or natural resources careers. Having the virtual interview just meant the candidates got to wait a lot less. Like we were able to flip the interviews around a lot more quickly. It was easier on the hiring team. So I think we're going to continue to see a mix of both virtual interviews and career fairs. Now I'm really excited to go back to in-person career fairs, but I mean, it's also really exhausting. So I'm really looking forward to the hybrid.
Well, thanks, Carolyn. And just in case you have to sign off while we're in another conversation, I want to thank you for the time you've given us so far in our workshop today.
All the recruiters at the state, but if you do have questions about jobs here at the state of Minnesota, I'm going to put my email in. Just make sure to remind me that you saw me present at this session. I'd be happy to help you.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right, Jim, Robert, would you share kind of your insights about virtual interviews, virtual job fairs? Are they here to stay or are they going away?
Well, virtual job fairs and video interviews were here before the pandemic, but I don't think they were as widely used. And I think now that more people are more comfortable with them and employers are more comfortable with them, I hope that we'll continue to use them in the future. I know that here at Allianz, we're going to continue to do that. And as Carolyn mentioned, it's providing a faster way to meet candidates. And so I think we may be replacing many of our first round interviews and just doing that on video, and then bringing in for second round interviews, the in-person interview. And that may be where we're headed, although we're still working on that, still trying to figure that scenario out. But yeah, and I hope that job fairs will be offering some kind of hybrid type of scenario so that we can have, both some kind of virtual opportunity as well as an in-person opportunity. So yeah, I think those are all true.
Thanks, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, sorry. My daughter was just coming in from the pool. I don't think they're going to go away either. We aren't going back to in-person events until 2022. So that's what our talent acquisition team has decided. But again, once you get into a corporate environment, booking rooms and things like that is just a total mess in person. And so I think we certainly will keep using virtual interviews. I don't know so much about the career fairs because career fairs are all externally set up anyway, so if Metro State decides to have a career fair that's in person and we're in 2022, then we'll go to the in-person event. I think, I guess my hope is that there's not a value placed on one or the other, I think that you can get good candidates and good information about somebody, whether they're sitting in front of a screen or in person. And so my concern is that as we go back, even thinking about going back to the workplace, that there's not one that's valued more than the other, you can get the most out of candidates no matter what situation you're in. And the thing I think about is people with limited mobility, and people who use Metro Transit to get around, and the cost and the time that it takes for somebody who really needs extra time and a lot of effort just to get to a career fair is a big deal. And so my hope is that, like that companies and organizations learn from that and realize that like these in-person career fairs aren't necessarily a good fit for everyone. And if we have an option to do it in a different way that gives more people access, then let's do that. So I don't think it is. I certainly don't. I hope it's not going away. Like I'm excited to get back into in-person events as much as the next person. I will not be shaking people's hands as much as I was, like at the end of a career fair, you shook like, 500 hands, it's like, I can't do that shit anymore. Sorry, but you can't, it's just a different environment. So like, I hope they don't. And I hope that we see the value in it for more reasons than just like, keeping everybody safe, like there's a lot of accessibility issues and stuff like that need to be considered as well.
I think from the university perspective, we for sure are not running career center events before 2022. And in addition to everything that's been shared, it's also been a cost savings. And last week we had a really great event where we had 2 professionals from Minnesota in attendance and 2 from the West Coast. We would have never been able to get that expertise in this space if we were doing it in person on campus. So that's been another great benefit. Yeah. Well, so that exhausts my questions I had pre-planned for our time together. So thank you all for your insights. I have not been seeing, I think we just got our first question. I'm gonna read it. So I haven't been able to legally change my name yet for a couple of reasons. Do you have any tips for how to go about this, and also how to get employers or prospective employers to address me with the correct pronouns, they, them, and my chosen name? I do already have an email signature that has my pronouns and gender listed and such, especially being non-binary and using MX as opposed to Mr. or Mrs. and using they, them pronouns. It has been proven to be very difficult just to be respected in that regard. So Jim, Robert, can you speak to this a little bit from the employer's perspective? And thank you for the question.
I'm not mute. I'm just reading it over again, if that's okay.
Yeah, Robert, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, first of all, we just need to be patient with people. You have no idea of the background of the individual that you're interviewing with. And, it's some people are well adjusted and well tuned to people's pronouns and, using people's names, preferred names, and different things. So my first suggestion would be to not present any information to any employer that you do not want them to call you by or to use. So that would be a first choice, a first thing to think about. And then just simply mention to them while you're speaking with them, my pronouns are this, my pronouns are he, him, or they, them. And you may have to do it a couple times, but eventually people should catch on if they're going to catch on. And if they're not going to catch on, then maybe that's a company that you might not want to work with. Maybe they're showing you their true colors, and you might want to just move on from that organization. So signatures are nice, but signatures are kind of the last thing that people read in the email, so they may miss it or pass over it. So don't rely on that. Be sure when you're having that in-person communication that you let them know. And so those are a couple of my suggestions.
Yeah, and so I got a chance to read it again. It is a great question, and I would say some of the same things. Like the hiring leaders that you're going to be interviewing with are all over the map with their understanding of like the use of pronouns and things like that. And so like I would say, if you have a preliminary conversation with the recruiter, and this is something that's important to you, and you want to make sure that whoever ends up interviewing you down the line gets it right, let them know that you want them to get it right. Like as an example, like reading your question, like I've never, and if you can, like educate me on this, I've not seen the prefix MX, you know, and so like if I see that, you know, that's totally fine. You know, like I'm gonna want to know, like, how do I say that? How do I pronounce that? And in my situation, like I would certainly do that, but you may have to do some educating of people when you're having these conversations, because, you know, like we can't, you know, we just can't expect everybody to know all these things because so many things are changing in this vein. So I would say, you know, like feel confident in letting them know like exactly what you want, because if someone's going to hire you, they're going to want to address you by the proper name, you know, like the proper pronoun, the proper name, and you want them to have some interest in getting that right. And so, you know, like do both parties a favor and make sure that they know how important it is to go through that process and get it right. And like, you know, if you do that and they still don't put in the effort, you know, like I think it's different. I think someone who's putting in the effort versus someone who's not even trying are two different things, you know, because, you know, like it may be a first introduction for somebody in this space. And if you're okay, like helping them grow in this area, then you need to make that decision going through that interview process. But certainly in this situation, be prepared to educate people and you know, check your own, you know, like check your own tolerance for how much growth you're willing to put up with, you know. You know, just be aware of that, because like some places, you know, it's going to be a long haul to get there. But, you know, if you don't want to put up with like that level of unawareness, then that's okay. You know, like you don't have to force yourself into their worldview, I guess.
Were you going to
I
add
was
something,
also,
Robert?
Mixter.
yeah, I was going to add something as
I
well.
like that. Sorry.
Sorry, were you done?
Oh yeah, no, I just
Okay.
saw that there. I like the term.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was just going to also add, as a recruiter, I say to the individual that I'm interviewing, you know, their name, whatever is on the top of their resume. So if you put, you know, whatever name you put up there, that is what I'm going to take, and that's what I'm going to use. So right after your name, be sure to put your pronouns. So that's what I'm looking at. That's what, you know, all the recruiters are, generally speaking, are going to use. And so that's what we're going to go by. So if you have trouble with that, you should, you know, that's the first key thing you should be looking at, is how am I presenting myself with my resume? So.
And we also got the additional question about how to find those employers who may be already open and understanding. And I want to reiterate that conversation we had about networking, of utilizing your networking to build that those connections. So you're already kind of in a space where you have a connection, maybe you feel more comfortable and you're not constantly educating or putting yourself out there and re-outing yourself or what have you. So really rely on work. And I think that we've had some phenomenal guests on our call today that might be open to connecting with you as well.
Yeah.
Another advice that we got in the chat was to look on the company's website and kind of get a gauge for what they're putting out there to their employees as one way to kind of see what are they putting out in their space. And Jim just echoed, he would encourage you to dig into their diversity pages to see how are they educating people on the job.
You also might want to consider looking up the company on the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index. At least you'll get an idea of what their score is. Hopefully they have a 100% score or a 95. But if it's a lower score, you know, there are companies on there that have much lower scores, you know, 50% or less. Then at least you know what you're dealing with as you communicate with them.
Robert, do you have any horns you wanted to regarding Allianz and maybe their score with the HRC index?
Yeah, we are 100% score on the HRC index, have been for several years. Before that, we were at 95%. We had to make some adjustments to our benefits plan to get that 100% score. But yeah, this is actually 4 years now we have been at 100% score.
Wonderful, congratulations. Well, I think I'm going to pause the questions for here for now. I want to highlight in the chat that next week, same place, same time, we are meeting to gather again to talk to some alumni who have graduated and gone into the workforce. And so we'll hear from them about their experiences. But I also want to take a moment to have Nick share with us about the upcoming Queer Career Fair and how you might get engaged or participate in that event.
Hey, everybody. What a great panel. Thanks, Jim and Robert. This is super good. I'm really excited to share this recording with our job seekers because I think they're going to get a lot of value out of it. We are super thrilled that the next Queer Career Fair is June 24th from 10 to 3 p.m. And if you're on the phone, we want to get you registered right away. I can put the link in the chat here. I know Emily's doing a great job of getting it out as well, but 10 to 3 p.m., you can book appointments with over 50 employers. Mosier, at the end of the day, we are really trying to create an ecosystem where we have amazing candidates who are interacting with employers that we believe have made the commitment to LGBTQ inclusion. I think Xcel and Allianz are for sure in that arena. I mentioned in the chat, all of our employers go through training on LGBT recruiting. So they're going to have a pronouns conversation. They're going to talk about non-binary identities. We train our companies on how to tell their LGBTQ inclusion story so that they can open up and actually tell you about their employee resource groups, their programs, really try and, our goal is that employers kind of make that first gesture of inclusion so you can kind of tell where they're at. That is kind of what separates Mosier's career fairs apart, I think. There's a job board associated with that. So before the fair and then after the fair, we'll be doing a lot of work with job seekers to get you back on our platform, ensure that you have what you need to actually apply for those jobs. As Robert said, career fairs are kind of just that first look, that first interaction, and there's a lot that happens afterwards. So we're going to support you the whole way until you land that job. So June 24th, 10 to 3 p.m., mosier.org. We will see you there.
Thank you, Jim, Robert, Nick, Sam. I appreciate all of you and the time that you've given to put this workshop together. It's just an amazing space to kind of gather the minds and learn from each other. And I appreciate the time that you gave us as well as your knowledge. So thank you for that. I will hang on the line, but this is our workshop. We would love to see you next week. We're having our third workshop 2 weeks from today. Nick is going to also be speaking about your identity and bringing that into the workplace. So I think we're ready for 2 more phenomenal workshops that we hope you can join us for.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you again.
Thank you.